On this episode, I talk to you about numbers, as in what to expect before going into your digital media project. What's up, everyone? So, Ryan, representing Sinister Media at sinister.media. So, let's get into a couple of numbers. I want to talk to you kind of very practically about what to expect going into your digital media project, i.e., let's say building a website as an example. And I want to do that just because I think a lot of people don't understand how much time and or cost is involved with building a website. So let's just break this down in a hypothetical situation. So big disclaimer, this is not how much your website will cost, but this is how much a website might cost. Well, first of all, I don't think people necessarily understand how much time goes into a website, but if I were going to build any kind of website project, I wouldn't allocate anything less than 10 to 15 hours for it. And so what I'm talking about when I say 10 to 15 hours is usually that represents kind of a landing page, right? Like that's, Bill's House of Tires, information about Bill's House of Tires, and call to action button that leads to something else. Um, so in other words, not an entire full website. We're talking like just basic information splash page. And I probably wouldn't put anything less than 10, maybe 15 hours in that between all of the putting copy in place, choosing fonts, designing images, image selection, uh, mobile, desktop, yada yada, getting the whole thing down, right? From there, if I were going to build out a website, I think the least I've ever done a website in is about 25 to 30 hours. And again, we're not talking about super fancy websites. We're talking about like homepage, about page, contact page, services page. So like 4 or 5 pages, mainly static content. And by static, I mean we're not talking about a lot of forms or a lot of like application data, pulling things from a server or anything like that. We're just kind of displaying stuff, images and text. So kind of a 30-hour minimum for something like that before we've even really gotten into serious blogging platforms and all that kind of stuff. Um, and that's usually for the desktop experience. Once I'm going mobile, I try to go mobile first, and you really should right now. Maybe I'll do an entire new video on that, but start mobile first, please. Um, and if you're starting mobile first, then I consider mobile maybe another 5 hours of work, or rather starting mobile and then changing it back to converting it to work on desktop as well as being another 5 hours worth of work. You can imagine that if you have a full blogging platform, that might be another 10 hours to make sure all your searching and paging and individual views and comments and all that kind of stuff looks right. Um, if you have calendars and event system, all I'm saying is it adds up very quickly. So 20 to 30 hours minimum, and then kind of like 5 to 6 hours per project, per piece of the project after that. But again, those are just super rough numbers. Um, what can help with this and what can help you roll out your website is to kind of have an understanding of where you want to go in the beginning, and then you can kind of do multiple rollouts. So in your first version, you have your static page. In your second version, you add on the blogging section, and in the third iteration, you put in the Facebook connection, the Facebook commenting, and the Instagram photo stream. So now that you know how long it takes, and again, this ties into what I said last week, which is um, if you're doing kind of a small project and you just want a landing page, kind of give it a solid week. And if you're doing like your website, if you're redoing the public facing of your website, I would say 6 weeks minimum. So then now that you understand how long your website might take, the second part is price. And it's actually pretty easy from there. Everybody charges differently, so I'm not going to pretend to say how that this is what your website will cost. But kind of a rule of thumb is just understanding, now that you understand how much work goes into something, understanding kind of what people charge per hour. based on where you live and a myriad of other details, this can change a lot dramatically. But let's just say a baseline, right? If I were just out of college, starting junior, or maybe still in college junior, I think $20 or $30 an hour for developer services would be reasonable, right? So if we were looking at something like the landing page that we talked about earlier, which was about 10 hours of work minimum, $20 or $30, let's say $30 an hour, that's about $300 of work. So, if your budget is about $200 to $300 for your website, from there, I would think that somebody with reasonable amount of experience, but still kind of early in their career, might start charging somewhere around $50 to $70 an hour. I think that would be a good choice for skilled labor, who maybe necessarily isn't completely at senior level, but skilled labor. And then I would think that the average around for working professionals is about $100 an hour. And even that isn't a particularly high price. I think that's kind of middle of the road of like higher end developers, and what I would consider kind of a reasonable or fair amount. But obviously some people, I know people who charge 120, 150. So kind of on the other end of the spectrum, say you have someone charging $100 an hour. Like I said, minimum for a website, probably about 30 hours worth of work minimum. You can imagine that if you're doing just kind of a static site that's well designed and reasonably well adapted, that would be about $2,000 to $3,000 worth of work. So again, these aren't to tell you like, oh, well, I heard on a video that a website should only cost $3,000, so why are you charging me so much? These are very dynamic projects, and what you're asking may take more work than you think it does. But this video is just to give you an idea. Before you even step foot in the door, I need to have this much set aside for this project, and then probably allocate another 20 or 30% on top of that. And that's usually for extra expenses that come by, maybe buying media, hosting your website, if you need images, things like that. If your needs change, I talked about this last time, if your needs change and the project goes long, you want to plan for all those kind of things. So hope that helps. I know that not everybody is familiar with all this stuff, and I just felt like maybe a really honest explanation of how much these services cost. I mean, I think it helps everybody. I think making things transparent like that just helps everybody, right? So if you have questions, you can email us at inbox@sinister.media. And until next time, peace.